I'm reporting on the project you see here on the screen. I'd just like to start by acknowledging my collaborators on this project and to point out that I undertook this work while I was a research fellow at Sydney Catalyst Translational Cancer Research Centre, and the funding for the project was provided by Cancer Australia's Lung Cancer Demonstration Project. The results of this project have also been recently published in BMJ Open at the end of last year, so I'm going to give you a fairly brief overview today, but if you would like to know more details, I'm happy to email you a copy of the publication afterwards. So this project ran over about a 2.5-year project, a 2.5-year period where we engaged with 2 lung cancer multidisciplinary teams in local Sydney Health District. And we had a project officer working with us to start off by conducting a needs assessment to look at areas where we might implement new simple interventions to try and answer some of the problems around where there are real gaps or deficiencies in practice. And in consultation with the multidisciplinary teams and our consumer group, so we had a group of 3 consumers, we'd identified that being able to report the outcomes of MDT meetings to general practitioners was something that was not happening, as far as we knew, anywhere at all within the local health district. As you can imagine, most general practitioners see less than 1 lung cancer patient per year, and frequently when that patient's diagnosed, the patient won't have ongoing contact with that GP during their active treatment time. For the GP then to provide information or follow-up care for that patient can be quite challenging if they're pretty much in the dark about what's happening with that patient's treatment. GPs also very rarely get to participate in MDT meetings. So in another project that we ran at Sydney Catalyst, we did an audit of over 33 different MDTs, and we actually found there was only 1 MDT who was regularly engaging with general practitioners as a member of those meetings. So today I just wanted to focus on what we did and to really report more on the qualitative rather than the quantitative results, because the challenge with this project was always going to be in our pre-implementation planning, engagement strategy, and making sure that we had the clinicians on board. So if you take on board that probably the average patient case is discussed for between 7 and 10 minutes, there's an enormous amount of clinical information that the multidisciplinary team has to consider in that time, looking at pathology slides, radiology, discussing the patient's case, any psychosocial or patient circumstances, as well as then each of the contributing clinicians having to talk about what are the recommended treatments for this patient, and then coming up with a consensus. So what we found was a key element to this project was being able to have a system where we could capture all of that information, know what was going in to the information that's collected before the MDT meeting actually takes place, or the preparation beforehand, so that we could pre-populate the form. And when I say we, I'm talking about my project officer and the medical and respiratory registrars who took on the responsibility for having to populate this information during the meeting. So an example of the template is there on the screen. You can see it's pretty basic, straightforward. It's giving a medical history for the patient. It's saying who's engaged in that MDT meeting, who are the clinicians that are present, what is the patient's diagnosis, what is the recommended treatment, and was there consensus during the meeting? So was there agreement? Because the GP is not necessarily going to get a sense of whether there are any dissenting views. So we had to take all of that information and in a very timely way, in that 7 to 10 minute time frame, be able to capture everything, enter new information, and then take that template, and within 48 hours we wanted to send that to the GP. So as you can see from the results up there on the slide, over that 13-month period where then we actually rolled out the template, we had 732 patients presented over that time. And of those, we had 492 patients with a GP listed. So we were able to contact all of their GPs. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, to those of you in the audience who've done GP research, 98% of our GPs wanted that information faxed to them. So we engaged the fax machine in great earnest, sent these reports out in a very timely way, and then we followed up with the GPs shortly after and asked them if they'd like to evaluate the template. So we had, on average, less than 10 minutes to speak to the GP on the phone, and we asked them a set of 6 questions, and they reported overall, you can see there on the slide, 95% of them said this is fantastic, provided useful information that was relevant, it was timely, it was easy to interpret, and it assisted in treatment planning and communication with their patient. And I've just popped up on the slide as well a few examples of some of the qualitative comments that we got back from the GPs. So in terms of implications, I think this project really highlights that we can look at some simple short-term solutions for communicating this sort of information to GPs about what's happening for their lung cancer patient. It's enabling us to think about what are the strategies that we need to put in place to make sure that for the MDT, that the types of strategies that we can engage in are something that they can incorporate into their work practice. We needed to heavily engage with the information and technology team to make sure that they could do all the back-end work of actually making this template integrate with the Cerner system that was in place. And if we hadn't done all that preparatory work in the lead up to sending out the templates, it wouldn't have allowed us then to see that what we were evaluating was actually something that would be sustainable in the longer term. So in terms of outcomes, you need to be able to transfer the knowledge collection and the process of sending out the template away from having a paid project officer in a short-term research role to a task that the medical and respiratory registrars can do as part of everyday practice. And we think that over the longer period we'll be able to sustain this in the 2 MDTs that have implemented the template. Following the end of this project, there was a lot of interest from other MDTs within Sydney Local Health District, and we sent out an expression of interest asking if they would like to go through a similar process, and we've had uptake with now 7 different MDTs adapting the template for their own use in their practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Does anybody have any questions?
Hello, Verity Ahern from Radiation Oncology. I'm just wondering if the templates can be pre-populated from the electronic medical record.
Yes, and that's exactly what we did. So we had as much information as we could going into that template so that then when the registrars were typing in the information, they had the pre-populated plus the live information going in at the same time. So it was a live process of doing that. Oh, I haven't answered your question. Sorry.
I had a question which was, obviously you've shown that this looks like it's working really well in practice and going from the MDT to the GP. What information do you have or are you planning to get on the difference it's making to patient outcomes?
Well, if someone would like to provide some funding for some follow-up evaluation, we'd be able to undertake that work. That wasn't within the scope of what we were doing, but certainly it would be terrific now to go back and assess particularly the impact on whether the recommended treatment at MDT was what went ahead, because that's not something that we could assess. So whether the patient in consultation with their GP or with their specialist decided to go ahead with that treatment, we haven't been able to collect that data. So it would be good to look at the impact over time, both of the patient, I guess, receiving more information and the GP as well.
Yeah. Very interesting, thank you.